Alexander Ward's voice tore through the mansion like a storm breaking glass. He'd left a board meeting early after a frantic call from security. "Sir, your maid is in the private suite with your son." Now, he stood frozen at the doorway, disbelief twisting into fury. Through the glass, Danielle Price was kneeling beside 9-year-old Eli, his frail legs trembling as she held him upright. Her hands were steady, her voice a whisper of encouragement. "You can do it, sweetheart. One more step." But to Alexander, it looked like something else entirely, a stranger's hands on his son. "What do you think you're doing?" he roared. The sound startled Eli. The boy lost balance, collapsing into Danielle's arms. "Sir, please!" She tried to explain, but security rushed in. Orders barked, boxes grabbed. "You're finished here," Alexander snapped. "Get out before I have you arrested." Eli reached toward her, panic on his small face. A sound escaped his lips, his first in months. "Stop, Neil." But his father didn't hear it. All Alexander saw was betrayal, and all he destroyed in that moment was a miracle. This is Black Stories, where the pain of prejudice is told and justice always finds its voice. If you believe a stranger's patience can do what power couldn't, tap like, subscribe, and keep watching. In the next minutes, you'll watch a fired maid turn a silent mansion into a place where a boy finds his voice. A father learns to listen, and pride gives way to grace. The buses had stopped running an hour ago, but Danielle Price was still awake, her sewing machine humming softly under the flicker of a single bulb. Threads and fabric scraps littered the table like confetti from a party she was never invited to. Each stitch wasn't for fashion. It was for survival. She glanced toward the small bedroom down the hall. Her 8-year-old son, Mason, fast asleep, one arm dangling off the bed, his math book still open. Danielle smiled, the kind of tired smile only a mother who's fighting on every front knows. Once upon a time, she didn't sew or scrub or pray for bus fare. She wore scrubs. She was someone. A pediatric rehab aide, a bright light at St. Gabriel's Hospital, the one who made kids laugh through pain, who played tambourine therapy for children relearning balance, who brought cupcakes to parents who hadn't smiled in weeks, until the day it all crumbled. A funding scandal, a falsified report. Her supervisor had covered up a botched treatment to protect a donor's child. Danielle filed the complaint, and the hospital called her disruptive. Her contract was temporarily suspended for review. That was 2 years ago. She never stopped fighting. But bills don't wait for truth. Now she cleaned homes for people who never looked her in the eye. She'd learned to smile through insult, to take pride in invisible work. Because dignity wasn't about titles. It was about how you showed up when no one thanked you. When she got the Ward estate offer, it felt like oxygen. A full-time position, benefits, quiet household, good pay. She didn't know who Alexander Ward really was, the billionaire developer on the cover of Forbes. Only that his mansion sat on the edge of Lakeview like a marble fortress against the world. Her first day, the air felt too still, like a museum. Staff moved in silence, efficient, mechanical, fearful. The boy, Eli, was wheeled in by a nurse who didn't meet his eyes. "He doesn't respond much," she said flatly. "Just clean around him." Danielle didn't listen. She knelt, not to pity him, to meet him. "Hey there, little man," she said softly. "You like music?" No answer, just a blink. His body trembled with every breath. His legs were braces and straps, his hands restless in his lap. But his eyes, they were alive, watching, measuring the world that spoke around him, never to him. The nurse rolled her eyes. "He won't engage." Don't waste your time." Danielle smiled without looking up. "That's okay. I've got time to waste." The nurse scoffed and left. And in the silence that followed, something changed. Eli's hand twitched. Just a tiny movement. But she caught it. She pulled a small rattle keychain from her pocket, something she used with the rehab kids. "Every time I shake this," she whispered, "you lift your hand. 1 inch, that's all." Nothing. Then, a flutter. His fingers lifted just barely. Her chest tightened. "There you go," she breathed. "There's my fighter." From that moment, their world became one of small miracles, tiny rebellions against hopelessness. At lunch breaks, she'd roll his wheelchair out to the garden, playing old soul music from her phone. "That's real rhythm," she'd joke. He'd watch the leaves dance in the breeze and mimic the movement with his fingertips. Every night, she returned home with sore feet and a full heart. Mason would run to meet her at the door. "Did your little buddy smile today?" he'd ask. Danielle would nod. "Almost." "Then tomorrow," Mason would say, serious as a soldier. "He will." By week 3, Eli began anticipating her, eyes flicking to the door at the sound of her footsteps. By week 4, he laughed, a sound so fragile it made her eyes sting. By week 6, he reached for her hand, the same hand the world told her wasn't good enough to heal anymore. The house staff whispered. Some called her reckless for getting too close, but Danielle didn't care. She'd seen enough children taught fear by neglect. Enough rich men replace love with silence. She wasn't about to let another child drown in loneliness just because the world had given up on him. And every day, when Eli's small hand pressed into hers, she remembered why she'd chosen this work in the first place. Because no matter how dark the world got, healing was still possible. What Danielle didn't know was that her care, her laughter, her defiance of quiet orders was being watched by cameras, by staff, by a man upstairs who believed love was weakness and was about to learn just how wrong he was. The Ward mansion was beautiful in the way an ice sculpture is beautiful, elegant, expensive, and designed to melt the moment you touched it. Danielle moved through its corridors like a careful whisper. Everything gleamed. Glass floors you could see your reflection in, portraits of ancestors whose smiles never reached their eyes, and fresh lilies that filled the air with a scent just sweet enough to hide the rot of loneliness underneath. No laughter, no music, no life. The other staff avoided her gaze, speaking only when necessary. At the laundry table one afternoon, the head maid leaned close and murmured, "Don't get too comfortable." The Wards don't like sentiment. Then she added, almost kindly, "They'll take it as weakness." Danielle only nodded, but inside she flinched. She had worked in enough rich homes to know that sometimes the richest hearts were the emptiest. When the Ward Foundation Gala came, the house transformed overnight. Crystal, gold, champagne. Danielle wore her black and white uniform like armor. She carried trays through a sea of silk gowns and tuxedos, invisible among the powerful. At the head table sat Alexander Ward, polished and unreadable, his son Eli beside him in a wheelchair that gleamed under the chandeliers. The boy's eyes darted around the room, searching for something human in a space that worshipped perfection. Danielle felt the first sting of anger when she overheard two investors near the bar. "Such a shame," one said lightly. "All that genius, and his heir can't even stand." "Some genes money can't fix," the other replied, laughing into his drink. Her jaw tightened. The tray shook in her hands. She forced a smile and moved on, but every step felt heavier than the last. Across the room, Alexander's glass was frozen halfway to his lips. He'd heard them. But he said nothing. His silence hung in the air like another chandelier, cold, glittering, immovable. After midnight, when the last limousine pulled away and the music died, Danielle lingered in the garden clearing tables. The mansion's windows glowed behind her like eyes. She spotted Alexander on the balcony above, alone, still in his suit, staring into the darkness as if searching for someone he'd lost there. She hesitated, then spoke softly. "Mr. Ward, I thought you should know." Eli moved his leg today, on his own. He didn't turn. His voice came quiet, measured, tired. "He doesn't need false hope, Miss Price. He needs acceptance." She looked up at him. "Sometimes hope is the only thing that makes acceptance possible." For a heartbeat, his mask cracked. His eyes met hers, haunted, unguarded. Then the shutters fell again. "Get some rest," he said, and disappeared inside. Danielle stood alone under the night sky, the wind tugging at her uniform. In the reflection of the glass doors above, she caught a glimpse of Eli's small face pressed against his window, watching. And in that fragile moment, she realized. The boy didn't need perfection. He needed someone who still believed in miracles. Eli's laughter came first. Quiet, shaky, real. Danielle nearly dropped the toy car in her hands when she heard it. For days she'd been working with him. Tiny movements, finger exercises, tracing songs in rhythm across his palm. But this was new. A sound that wasn't pain or effort. It was joy. She froze, eyes wide. "Do it again, sweetheart," she whispered. "Please." The boy smiled, small but radiant. In that sterile house where every breath was measured and every heart felt caged, the moment was sunlight. Danielle felt it in her chest, like something finally alive again. That was when the door opened. Miss Carlyle, the head nurse, stood with her arms folded. Her uniform was immaculate, her expression colder than the tile underfoot. "What is going on here?" Danielle straightened. "He's responding." "Look," he smiled. He moved his fingers. Carlyle's tone cut like a blade. "You're paid to clean, not play therapist." Danielle's voice trembled, but she didn't step back. "I used to be a pediatric rehab aide. I know the exercises. They help." "That's irrelevant. You have no authorization to touch the patient." "Patient?" Danielle repeated softly, glancing at Eli. "He's a child. A beautiful child, not a patient." The nurse's lips tightened. "Do it again and you'll be dismissed." Then she turned and left, heels clicking, the sound lingering like a threat. That night, Danielle couldn't sleep. The memory of Eli's laugh replayed in her head, brighter than anything she'd seen in that mansion. It didn't matter what Carlyle said. She'd seen a spark. And once you see light in someone's darkness, you can't pretend it's not there. So the next afternoon, when she saw Eli sitting by the window, staring out at the garden he was never taken to anymore, she couldn't help herself. She slipped into the room quietly. "Hey, champ," she whispered. "You remember that song?" He blinked. She hummed the tune again, soft and low, guiding his hand gently to the rhythm on the armrest. Tap. Tap. Pause. "Breathe," she said softly. 1, 2. His fingers twitched. Then his arm moved. Just slightly, but it moved. "That's it," she whispered, tears filling her eyes. "That's it, baby, you're doing it." She leaned closer, hands trembling with joy. "You're stronger than they think. You hear me?" Eli's eyes lit up, wide and focused on her, as if he'd been waiting his whole life for someone to see him. And that's when she heard it. The camera click. She turned sharply. Liza, the younger maid, stood at the door, her phone raised, smirk curling her lips. "Well," Liza said slowly, "that doesn't look very professional, does it?" "Delete that," Danielle said, stepping forward. "Oh, I will," Liza replied, pocketing her phone. "After Mr. Ward sees it." The next hour felt endless. Danielle tried to focus on work, but her hands trembled with dread. She could feel the storm gathering above her. And when the storm finally came, it didn't knock. Alexander Ward's voice shattered the quiet like thunder. "Miss Price!" She turned. He was standing in the doorway, phone in hand, anger simmering under his perfect composure. The image on the screen made her stomach drop. Her and Eli, mid-exercise, her hand resting over his. He stepped closer. "Explain this." Her throat went dry. He was responding. "I wasn't." "You were alone in his room?" His tone cut. "Off duty, without clearance. Touching my son without medical supervision?" Her heart pounded. "I wasn't touching him to harm, sir. I was helping." He smiled. He dash. "You think because he smiled, you've cured him?" Alexander's voice rose for the first time since she'd met him. "Do you know how many specialists I've paid? How many experts told me movement wasn't possible? And you—" His jaw trembled. "You want me to believe a housekeeper fixed him?" Danielle's eyes filled. "I don't want you to believe me. I want you to see him." She turned to Eli, kneeling before him. "Go ahead, sweetheart. Show him what you did earlier." Eli's lips parted. His fingers twitched. Then, a sound. Broken, raw but unmistakable. "Duh!" Alexander froze. Eli's chest rose, trembling. "Danielle." The sound wasn't just a voice, it was proof. Danielle gasped, tears spilling down her cheeks. "You see?" He said my name. But the silence that followed wasn't awe. It was disbelief. Alexander's expression hardened, wounded pride masquerading as control. "Enough. Leave the room." Her voice broke. "He spoke, sir. Get out. Mr. Ward, please. I said get out." The shout echoed through the mansion. Eli flinched, his small body recoiling. Danielle stood frozen, tears streaming, while Alexander turned away, his shoulders stiff, his control cracking. But he couldn't face what he'd just seen. He couldn't admit that the woman he'd looked down on had done what medicine couldn't. Danielle whispered, "I'm sorry," and walked toward the door, each step heavier than the last. Behind her, Eli reached out, his hand trembling in the air, trying to call her back. But Alexander didn't see. He only saw his own reflection in the window, a man haunted by his pride, staring into a house built on silence. And for the first time, that silence began to feel like punishment. Danielle didn't return to the Ward mansion the next morning. Her uniform hung neatly on the hook by her door, pressed and waiting, as if some part of her still believed they'd call and apologize. But no one did. The call that finally came wasn't from the Wards. It was from the agency. "Effective immediately," the voice said coldly, "your services are no longer required at that residence." Then, click. Danielle sank onto the edge of her bed, staring at her hands. The same hands that had guided a child toward movement, now trembling from helplessness. In a house of mirrors, truth had no place. Meanwhile, inside that mansion of glass and guilt, Alexander couldn't sleep. He'd heard the boy's voice. Every night since, it echoed in his mind. Niel. He told himself it was a coincidence, a sound, a trick of breath. But denial has a short shelf life. Late one night, he walked into Eli's room. The boy was asleep, one small hand curled around the worn toy Danielle had left behind. Alexander stood there for a long time, the air heavy with regret and something sharper. Shame. He whispered, almost to himself, "What did she do to you, son?" The answer came the next morning. When Eli woke, his nurse reported something strange. "He's humming," she said, "some little tune, over and over." Alexander froze. "What tune?" The nurse shrugged. "I don't know. It's familiar. Soft." He went to the room, standing in the doorway as the boy rocked gently in his chair, mouthing a wordless melody, the same one Danielle used to hum. He didn't know the song, but the way his son's lips moved told him it was hers. That was the crack that split the dam. 3 days later, an envelope arrived at Alexander's office. No return address. Inside were printed photographs, the ones Liza had taken that night. But this time, there was a note scribbled in careful handwriting beneath each one. She never hurt him. She believed in him. He smiled for her. And below the last photo, one of Eli mid-laugh, a child's uneven scrawl in crayon. "Find her." Alexander felt the floor tilt beneath him. His knees went weak. He turned the photo over and realized it was Eli's handwriting. His son, who hadn't written in over 2 years. The truth hit him like a wave. Danielle hadn't overstepped. She hadn't crossed a line. She had built a bridge he'd been too proud to walk across. All the specialists, all the money, all the polished men in white coats. None of them had done what she did with patience and song. That night, Alexander sat alone in his study, staring at the fireplace. Flames flickered over his reflection in the glass, showing him what he'd become. A man so terrified of being wrong that he punished the only person who'd been right. He whispered the name he'd tried to forget. Danielle. The next morning, he made a call to the agency. "I need her contact information," he said. The receptionist hesitated. "Sir, we're not allowed to—" "This isn't a request." Minutes later, an address appeared in his inbox. He didn't wait. Within an hour, he was standing in front of a small apartment complex on the south side of the city. Peeling paint. Children playing in the courtyard. No marble floors, no chandeliers, just life. For a man used to being announced, knocking on a chipped door felt like penance. He knocked. A moment passed. Then the door opened. Danielle stood there, eyes wide, surprise flickering into guarded composure. "Mr. Ward." He took a breath. "I owe you an apology." Her voice was quiet. "For what, exactly?" "For doubting what I saw." She studied him for a long, silent moment, the man who had once looked through her like glass. "I wasn't trying to prove anything," she said finally. "I just wanted him to feel seen." "He does," Alexander said softly. "Because of you." And for the first time since his wife's death, his voice broke. "I thought I'd already lost my son." He looked at her, eyes raw. "But you brought him back." Danielle's shoulders softened, but she didn't let herself cry. "Then don't lose him again," she said gently. "Don't make him live in silence just because it's comfortable for you." He nodded slowly, the weight of every word sinking in. I want to make things right, he whispered. Then start by listening, she said. He's been speaking all along, just not in the way you wanted. And as Alexander stood in that modest apartment, surrounded by the warmth and life his mansion could never buy, something shifted inside him. For the first time, he didn't feel like a billionaire. He felt like a father. For 2 weeks, Alexander Ward's mansion was silent again, but not peaceful. Everywhere he looked, he saw her. In the corner of the garden where she used to hum softly. In the reflection of the glass where Eli's laughter once echoed. In his son's eyes when he refused to look at him. Eli had stopped responding to anyone. He refused to eat with the nurses. He turned away when spoken to. The only word he muttered, over and over, was the one name his father couldn't escape. Danielle. The guilt festered until it broke him. So when the hospital charity gala came, the one meant to showcase progress in pediatric rehabilitation, sponsored by Ward Industries, Alexander saw it as a chance to rewrite what he'd broken. He planned to make a speech about innovation and hope, words he barely believed in anymore. But fate, as always, had other plans. Because when he arrived at the gala, bow tie immaculate, mask of control firmly in place, he saw something that stopped him cold. Across the ballroom, carrying a tray of champagne flutes and balancing the weight of a dozen dismissive stares, was Danielle. The agency had reassigned her to event catering. Her posture was steady, but her eyes told another story. The quiet ache of a woman who'd learned to expect punishment for kindness. And in that instant, Alexander's world tilted. The speeches began. Cameras rolled. Reporters leaned in. When Alexander took the stage, his words were smooth, practiced. Our children deserve the best science can offer, he began, glancing toward Eli, seated near the front in his wheelchair. And through partnership, research, and dash. He stopped. Because Eli was humming, softly, faintly, that same melody. Danielle's melody. The crowd turned, phones came out. The CEO of Ward Industries, the unshakable perfectionist, stood frozen on stage as his son, silent for years, sang the tune that had broken through every barrier. And then, in the clearest voice he'd ever managed, Eli whispered, "Duh, Niel." The sound wasn't loud, but it didn't have to be. You could have heard a pin drop. Danielle froze mid-serve, glass trembling in her hand. The crowd slowly turned toward her, following Eli's gaze, the boy reaching out from his chair, his hand extended across the room. She shook her head, stepping back, whispering, "No. No, baby, not here." But Eli's voice came again, louder now. "Danielle." And just like that, the illusion shattered. The billionaire, the spotless image, the clinical world of protocols and specialists, all of it crumbled under the truth of one child's longing for the only person who truly saw him. Alexander's voice cracked through the silence. "Please, bring her here." The event manager blinked. "Sir?" "I said bring her here." The crowd parted as Danielle was led to the stage, eyes wide, chest heaving. When she faced him, the world went still. Two people who had lived on opposite sides of privilege and pain, now standing inches apart, the cameras blinking like judgmental eyes. Alexander spoke first. "You taught my son to speak." Her voice was quiet, raw. "No, he just needed someone to listen." The line hit the room like a thunderclap. A reporter in the front row whispered, "Is this the same woman he fired?" Another one began filming. Alexander turned to the audience, his public mask slipping for the first time in his career. "2 months ago," he said, I dismissed this woman for caring more than I understood. His voice trembled, and that was my greatest mistake. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Danielle looked down, overwhelmed. "Mr. Ward, please." He shook his head. "No, the world deserves to know the truth." He gestured toward Eli. "My son did not speak because of money, or medicine, or me. He spoke because someone who was paid to clean dared to care." Gasps swept the hall. Even Miss Carlyle, standing stiff by the wall, lowered her eyes in shame. Alexander turned to Danielle again, not as an employer, but as a man stripped bare of pride. "You gave my son a voice," he said softly. "The least I can do is give you the world's ear." He stepped aside, motioning to the microphone. Danielle hesitated, the spotlight heavy on her, but Eli's eyes met hers. His small hand lifted again, trembling, beckoning. She walked forward. Her voice shook at first. "I'm not a scientist," she said. "I'm not rich. I'm not even supposed to be standing here." She looked out over the crowd. "But I've seen something none of your charts can measure. Children don't just need treatment. They need touch. They need to feel seen." Her eyes found Alexander's. "And sometimes, the ones who see them first are the ones you see last." The silence that followed was electric, grief and admiration mixing in the air. Then, applause. It started with one pair of hands in the back, then two, then the entire hall erupted, the sound rising like thunder. Eli laughed. For the first time in years, a full, unbroken laugh. And Alexander, the billionaire who'd once thought empathy was weakness, let tears roll down his face, unashamed, before thousands of flashing cameras. In that moment, the hierarchy broke. The maid and the magnate stood as equals. And the whole world watched a truth money could never buy unfold in real time. A year later, the Ward estate no longer looked like the same place. The marble floors still gleamed, but now children's laughter echoed through the halls where silence once ruled. What used to be an untouchable mansion had been transformed into the Ward Center for Restorative Care, a haven for kids recovering from trauma, disability, or loss. And the first thing guests saw when they entered wasn't a portrait of the billionaire. It was a bronze plaque near the entrance, embossed with simple words, "In honor of the woman who taught us to listen, Danielle Price." That morning, reporters filled the courtyard for the official dedication. Cameras, not flashing for scandal this time, but celebration. Alexander stood at the podium, visibly older, visibly freer. His voice wavered, not from nerves, but gratitude. "I built this house to protect my family," he said, looking at the crowd, "and ended up building walls instead." He turned toward Danielle, sitting front row beside her teenage son. She tore those walls down. Not with money, not with force, with patience. Applause rolled across the courtyard like thunder under sunlight. But the moment belonged to Danielle. When she stepped forward to speak, she didn't read a speech. She simply told the truth. "I used to clean these floors," she said, glancing around the courtyard, thinking the dirt beneath my shoes meant I didn't belong. But sometimes, life puts you in the room you're meant to change. Her gaze moved to the crowd of nurses, therapists, and volunteers. "This place isn't about me. It's about every child who was told to stay quiet, every worker who was told their heart didn't count as a credential." Then she smiled at Eli, now strong enough to stand beside her with a walker, his eyes bright as he gripped her hand. "We all have something to give. We just need someone to believe we can." The applause this time wasn't polite. It was alive, After the ceremony, Alexander approached her quietly, away from the cameras. "Danielle," he said, voice low, "I can never repay what you gave us." "You already did," she replied. "You listened." He nodded, swallowing emotion, then handed her a folder. Inside was an offer letter. Director of Family Integration Programs. Danielle looked up, stunned. "Me?" "You've been doing the work all along," he said. "Now I just want the world to see it." She hesitated, then smiled. "Only if we make space for more like me." "Already in motion," he said. "We're hiring from within the communities we ignored." And for the first time, both laughed, not from irony, but from relief. By evening, the courtyard emptied, leaving only the soft glow of lanterns. Danielle sat with her son on the steps, watching children roll and play in wheelchairs custom fit by volunteers. Eli was among them, chasing a bouncing ball with the others, his laughter carrying through the dusk. "Mom," her own son whispered, "you changed everything." She smiled, her eyes wet but proud. "No, baby." We heard everything that needed to change. A breeze rustled the trees, the same whispering sound she used to hum for Eli in the garden. And for the first time in a long time, the world felt quiet in a good way. That night, a clip from the ceremony trended again. Eli and Danielle laughing under the new plaque. Alexander watching from behind, smiling. The caption read, "The maid who healed a mansion." But the top-liked comment said it better. She didn't just heal them. She healed how they see people. And maybe that was the real justice all along. Not revenge, not exposure, but restoration. Because sometimes the loudest sound of change is finally listening. They called her just the maid. They said she didn't belong in rooms of power, but in the silence they built. She taught them how to hear again. Because strength isn't about standing over others. It's about standing with them until they can rise on their own. This is Black Stories, where grace rewrites power and dignity rebuilds the world. If you believe listening can heal what power breaks, like, share, and subscribe. Because we share stories like this every week.
Años exactamente, bueno, no exactamente, ¿no? Un grupo de soñadores en La Paz decidió fundar algo que trascendería generaciones. El glorioso Club Bolívar. No imaginaron que... Oye, me he esforzado al hacer el discurso. ¿Qué ponen ZZ, chat? Basta, me he esforzado, se los juro que me he esforzado, bro, basta. Por favor, me he esforzado en el discurso, respétenme un poquito, chat. Bueno, igual lo voy a leer, me la chupan, la verdad. Chat, nefastos. Son unos envidiosos, ¿saben? Son unos envidiosos. ¿En qué me quedé? No imaginaron que ese nombre se convertiría en un sinónimo de grandeza, lucha y de orgullo nacional. 101 años después, Bolívar no es solo un club. Es un sentimiento que se hereda, que se sufre y se celebra. Últimamente sufrimos mucho por Robato, ¿no? Es el latido de miles de hinchas que en cada victoria y en cada caída nunca abandonan, ¿verdad? No más. Porque ser celeste no es una elección, es una forma de vivir. Muy bien, qué lindo, un aplauso. Bravo, bravo. Muchachos, tremendo discurso. Buenas noches, Edito, ¿cómo estás? Por lo menos ponte tu chompita, pues, un busito para leer el discurso. A ver, cállate, Gabo, ¿vos quieres ser baneado? Este discurso lo he hecho en mi cama, pensando en lo que es ser bolivarista, la verdad. Un aplauso, por favor, y con ayuda también del gran ChatGPT. Un aplauso para ChatGPT. Ah, ¿cuál era la finalización? De un ratito, dice. Que estos 101 años sean solo el comienzo de muchas más llenos de alegría. Felicidades, Academia. Felicidades, Bolívar. ¡Bravo! Aplausos para ChatGPT, muchachos. Para vos no, dice. Buenas noches, muchachos, ¿cómo están? Gracias por estar aquí, perdón por prender tan tarde. La verdad estaba viendo mi serie, estaba viendo el regreso de Justin Bieber. Bueno, toda la tarde me vi fútbol, hasta vi el partido del Tigre, vi el partido de River, vi el partido de Oriente, las declaraciones de Martins, tremendo lo de Martins, bebé, le tiró palo a Villegas, pero bien tirado. Huevada, en su cama lo hizo todo pajeado pensando en el... No, ¿qué dice este Arielito? Oye, ¿quiénes vamos, no? Mi sobrino de kinder redacta mejor. Dile eso a ChatGPT, yo no he redactado. ¿Qué me estás molestando a mí? Felicidades. Qué pasado. Pues la verdad nomás. ¿Qué quieren que les diga? A ver, ¿qué les puedo decir, muchachos? Yo no publiqué nada en mi página, la verdad no hice nada estos días. Han sido momentos difíciles. Bien triste, ¿no? Mentira. Pero no, muchachos, bueno. Quiero felicitar a todos los que son bolivaristas y hoy en día más que nunca, ¿no? Que es difícil ser bolivarista en el sentido de todo el contexto que estamos pasando con el técnico. Pero si lo ven por el otro lado también hay que sentirnos orgullosos porque hemos llegado a estos 101 años. Creo que como la institución mejor parada, tanto económicamente, futbolísticamente y dirigencialmente diría, pero no, creo que no, ahí nos falta, ¿no? Ese eslabón para poder ser una institución sólida. Y como ayer creo que lo decía Dardo Gómez en su publicación en el Cholet, que Dios mío, ¿de dónde cagan tanta plata, bebés? Más fuegos pirotécnicos que en el aniversario de La Paz, no mames. Tremendo, felicidades a los del Cholet, y a ver si pasan pues algunos moneys. No mentira. Que dijo que el dirigente tiene que estar siempre al lado del hincha, y eso es mucha verdad, y no es por darle palo a Claure, porque él tendrá sus funciones, las cosas que tiene que hacer, pero creo que por esa parte que estoy... Uy, ¿qué? No, todavía no va a arrancar la fiesta, Tucán, tranquilo. y por esa parte creo que está bien, ¿no? Está bien, y bueno, se vienen unas futuras elecciones, donde el principal candidato es Dardo Gómez, a seguir manejando lo que es este club tan bonito que es Bolívar, ¿no? Por detrás, obviamente, yo creo que tiene que haber gente que lo asesore. Espera, ¿mi gatita se echó pipí? No, ya, más bien. Me ha asustado, chicos, la verdad, me ha asustado. Ya saben ustedes, rayada está mi gatito últimamente, ¿no? No, ¿qué dice este Eddie Pox? Y bueno, muchachos, nos espera, creo, un futuro grandioso. Yo lo dije, creo que esta es una oportunidad ya con el estadio de una vez establecernos como un club de fútbol, pero serio, y fuera de ser autosostenible, que se proyecte a más, ¿me entiendes? No estancarnos en solo ser un club boliviano, sino ya empezar a soñar con, no sé, a ver, por ejemplo, la venta de butacas en el estadio, venta de marketing, merchandising, que se vaya ampliando más las sociedades, ¿me entienden? O sea, yo creo que si una cabeza maneja bien todo eso, creo que podemos despegar, ¿me entiendes? Y no estar ahí creando leyes de mierda con el gobierno, pidiendo perdón para que nos perdonen los impuestos, ¿no? Los gatos, ¿no? Entonces, creo que, o ser un club que está a punto de desaparecer, como Wilstermann, que desapareció de la liga, pero está a punto de desaparecer, pero absolutamente de todo el fútbol. O ser clubes que le están mangueando el auspicio a la UTV y chupándosela al presidente de la federación por subsistir. Entonces, creo que Bolívar es muy grande y tiene, creo que, trascender. Eso es lo que nos falta, trascender, dar ese pasito para trascender y lograr los objetivos que siempre hemos querido, ya sea una Copa Sudamericana o una Copa Libertadores, ¿no? Y siempre tiene que ir de la mano. Estos últimos años, creo que es la verdad, se han ido alejando a las generaciones bolivaristas, al hincha común, al hincha fanático, a todos los tipos de hinchas se han ido alejando del club, por justamente el mal trabajo que se ha ido realizando estos últimos años en Bolívar. ¿Qué decía Valdivia? Creo que dijo que dejó un club autosostenible. O sea, sí, no vamos a decir que no. Económicamente creo que se dejó un club autosostenible. A ver, Solís, no pidas Gartic, ya les he dicho qué cosa de Gartic. Hoy día es aniversario del club, déjame hablar a ver de mi club, Solís. Igual en el grupo de WhatsApp, no, Tucán, jugaremos Gartic. No quiero dibujar huevadas, déjame, no voy a jugar Gartic. Ya les he dicho, si quieren dibujar, agarren un cuadernito y empiezan a dibujar sus huevadas. No me vengan a molestar a mí con su Gartic. Saludos, Reyisita, ¿cómo estás? ¿Todo bien? Gartic, temática Bolívar. No, métanse su Gartic por el poto, ya les he dicho. Y bueno, muchachos, ¿en qué estaba? Es que me enerva, muchachos, cada vez Gartic, basta, no quiero jugar Gartic, vayan a jugar Gartic con sus minas. Goklingo, huevadas hablas, ya, espera, ¿qué habla este Ignacio Loza, este Auri? Y bueno, muchachos, creo que sí, yo me quedo con eso. Este martes tenemos un partido muy importante en lo económico. Para mí, muy importante para ver qué está el club de cara a este año, porque creo que es indispensable ganarle a ese equipo. En Copa Libertadores, obviamente por los 3 puntos y más. Pero pensando a futuro, creo que es muy importante que se vea buen fútbol, ¿no? Y que la gente ya esté un poquito más tranquila con el funcionamiento del equipo. Ayer contra Bebé, bueno, el día sábado contra Bebé, se jugó un buen partido, no digo que un malo partido. Creo que empezaron a aparecer personas, o bueno, jugadores que no estaban apareciendo, como es el Papu Velázquez y muchos más, ¿no? Entonces, interesante. Y bueno, apareció Cauterucho, que en el partido de Libertadores no había aparecido ni de sombra. Parece que Cauterucho solo le mete goles a equipos como ABB. Y preocupa un poquito eso, ¿no? Hoy ganó el Tigre, está puntero con nosotros. Nacional Potosí también está compartiendo la punta con nosotros y muchos más que vienen bien entonándose en lo que es este torneo, ¿no? Que empezó retardísimo y creo que nos va a pesar no solo a nosotros, sino a los demás equipos que están participando en copas internacionales, ya sea Blooming el caso, ¿no? Y otros más. Mete gol equipo chicos como Dorniro, pero Dorni ni jugó. ¿Qué dicen, chicos? ¿Qué dicen? La era Robato es la peor de todos los tiempos, bebé. Tomando en cuenta el centenario que es una vez en la vida. Sí, es la peor. La peor. De los últimos 10 años, ¿se podría decir que lo de Robato es lo peor que nos pudo pasar? A ver, piensen. Es que con lo que me dice el técnico de... A ver... Ustedes pónganse a pensar, si tu técnico te dice que el objetivo era solo clasificar a Libertadores y que no estaba obligado a ser campeón, puta, ahí me la bajó mal, amigos, sinceramente, me la bajó mal. Podía aceptarle todas sus huevadas y todo, pero cuando dijo eso, es como que hizo sentir me hizo sentir un club más del montón, ¿me entiendes? Un Nacional Potosí, una Aurora, no sé, otros equipos bien X, así me hizo sentir, la verdad. Por eso yo vuelvo a repetir, yo voy a hablar de lo que veo en la cancha y este martes si es que Bolívar gana se va a aplaudir y si es que Bolívar pierde, bueno, también se va a criticar algunas cosas y si han fallado algunas cosas igual vamos a criticarlas, vamos a observarlas y vamos a dar nuestro criterio. Pero fuera de eso, Robato no puede venir a achicar el club, ¿me entiendes? O sea, creo que hemos tenido el parámetro y la vara de estos últimos años, bueno, desde que yo nací, desde que voy a la cancha, creo que el parámetro ha sido que Bolívar siempre salga campeón, ¿no? Bueno, un ratito vamos a banear al Gaby.